Hello everybody, welcome to Knit 56. This is my podcast about knitting. And today is December 21st, 2016. It's solstice, so Happy New Year everyone. I'm really excited to be here with you today. I have some fun things to share. I have some new yarn. You can see a little bit of it right there. And I'm going to be reading from James Newbury's book today at the end of the podcast. And I have some knitting to show you as well. So let's get started. And thank you for joining me, first of all. I know it's a busy, busy time of year. So I'm going to start off by showing you some yarn that I was gifted. A friend of mine, her mother recently passed away, and her mother was a huge textile fan. She had things for weaving, things for lots of bobbins for bobbin lace. She had tons of yarn. Lots of projects started and new, and this yarn was given to me, and it is a great yarn, I think. I can't wait to start working with it. It's from Norway. Here's the label. Of course I can't say it. There are many small skeins like this, and many larger skeins. It's all the same weight. I can't wait to figure out what I'm going to do with all this color work. It's so awesome. Let me show you this yarn, then I can get it off my table. So we have red and orange and blue. Lots of blues. Look at all that yarn. I can't believe it. I can't wait. It's beautiful. There's so many colors. There's some darker blues. I hope I haven't made you seasick. But I just want to keep looking at this huge pile of yarn. And there's even more. I'm so excited about it. Okay, I've got myself rearranged. I put the yarn down and away so I can continue on. But imagine the color work. And this book was also in that stash of stuff. Thank you, Debbie and Carl. I love my new yarn. And this book is in Swedish. But it's got some great pictures. Look, there's some more of the great mittens. There's this one picture in here I have to show you. I could look at this book all day. I can't understand a word it says because it's in Swedish, but look at these socks. It just makes me wish I had nothing but time. Nothing but time so that I could sit and knit. I love all this stuff. Oh, look at this sweater. All right. This is kind of funny. All that color work and then a white bottom. I don't really understand it, but there is another picture in here I wanted to show you of, let's see, where is it? A vest. A beautiful vest. There's more stockings. Oh man, I would just love to wear a pair of stockings like that. Imagine colorwork stockings up to your, like, tights. Oh, it would be so great. Okay, look at these gloves and mittens. Look at the detail. Embroidery. Not only do you knit the mitten, then you embroider it. It's amazing. It's amazing what people can do. There's some great pictures. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. Oh, sorry. I know. It's not much fun watching me look at a book, right? I'm just gonna... I wish I could understand it. Look at this drawing. The gentleman has got his hands up in the air with his newspaper, and she's sitting there knitting. She looks... It's kind of... I wish I knew what that meant. Anyway, okay, so I'm going to look through this book and maybe have get some ideas about what to do with all this yarn. Okay, here is one of the vests. We're getting to the area where I was, oh yeah, this is it. Look at this. This is a piece of art. Look at that vest. It's amazing. yeah, I would love to make something like that and then wear it. So great. So what have I been knitting? Okay, those are my plans, my dreaming time. I have an update. Oh, here, let me show you. I've been working on my white winter jacket. It's such a huge project. So this is the back. And there's a piece right here that is worked in the round that's all done, the yoke. So the yoke goes all the way around. This actually comes down about like this. Comes down just below my knees. It gets darker near the bottom. So this is the back. And there's a side on each side, the sleeves and two fronts. So this is done, this piece is done, and this piece is done. This is this front and the side. So you can see there's a pocket opening right here. And there's, you know, the yoke goes across the top. So the sleeve sets in there. I'm really excited, but I'm getting down to the hard part where I have to figure out how it's all going to fit together. I have a little bit of a border on this edge. So here's the front and the side. You can see the pocket opening. And I think I'm going to knit a really stiff, firm pocket and then line it. The whole thing will also be lined, so I'll have to sew a lining. Look at that. I'm really excited about it, but I'm also, I really would like it to be done. Yeah. So that's my winter jacket, my white winter coat. I was hoping to have it done by Christmas, but I don't think that's going to happen. So, yeah. And then the other thing I've been working on, which I just sent a pattern off to be test knit, and it's calling my Have a Glass of Wine and Knit shawl, because I think it's fairly simple. It's garter stitch with some eyelet rows of lace. And this is the third one I've done. And it's, so it's garter stitch rows that grow in width, alternating with eyelet rows. So you don't really have to count once you get it set up. And then I ran out of the green, which is, I did on purpose. I used more green at the beginning. And then the one side is going to be all eyelet rows of alternated with some garter stitch rows. This yarn is really nice. And I think I'm knitting this on a size 3 or 4. No, I think it's a 3. US 3. And it's really fun. And I can't wait to finish it and get the pattern out there. See what my friend thinks of it. See if she thinks it's as easy as I do. She's been knitting, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years. So if she thinks it's easy, then it's a success. The other thing I've been investigating is a thing called vortex shawls. I ran across this website about the shaping of vortex shawls, which kind of swirl out like that. And I'm not sure exactly how it works. I'm using this lace weight merino that came from my friend and her mom's collection of yarn. I'll show you the label. There's the label. I really like this yarn. It's very soft. It's 100% new wool, 100% merino, and it has great stitch definition. It's a 1-ply. I will probably felt. I'm using size 1 Haya bamboo, I think. And I'm using this simple lace pattern. Look at that stitch definition. There are twisted stitches between the lace panels. I just can't, it's amazing to me, the stitch definition in this yarn. It's so fine, and yet it really shows up. So it's the kind of thing where you start small, the shaping, and you add along one end and you decrease on the other, but not regularly. And I have about 650 yards of this, so I'm just going to keep knitting this until it's done, and we'll see. It's my experiment with this kind of shaping. It's fun. I like the knitting. I like the needles. I like the yarn. The yarn's really fun to work with. Okay. Do I have any other projects? I think I don't have any other projects. No. So, let's get to some history. Some yarn history. So James Newbury was very influential in knitting in England, like 25 years or so right after World War II. He was director or president. He was involved with Patton's yarn. I can't remember. I wrote some notes down here. He was a spokesman, designer and spokesman for Patton's yarns. And very influential man. Believed that knitting had a right way and a wrong way. And I don't really believe that, because I've seen so many people knitting and everyone does it different. Everyone has their own way and they all create beautiful work. So once you my philosophy is that if you understand what a knit stitch looks like and how it's made, you can do that in whatever way works best for you. Achieve those stitches. So I used to teach beginning knitting, and I wouldn't tell people which hand to hold the yarn in. I would start by having them stand behind me and look at how a knit stitch was made. That's all I would do. Show them how it was made. And then we'd sit down and I'd show them how to, long tail cast on was my go-to cast on. And then I would watch them. Some people pick the yarn up in their left hand. Some people pick it up in their right hand. And then we would continue to move along, and I'd help them figure out an economical and ergonomical way for them to knit with the yarn in whichever hand they first chose. And it was really fun. It was really great just to see how it developed and what people do. Everyone is so different. And knitting is so awesome. Okay, so here we go. James Norbury, traditional knitting patterns. I think what I'm going to do, I like reading in my podcasts. It's just some information that people might not have in their library. So this book, he separates it into different areas of the world. So the chapters are Arabic knitting, Spanish knitting, Italian and French, and then French, and so interesting, German and Austrian, Dutch knitting, Scandinavian knitting, Fair Island, Shetland knitting, British Isles knitting. So there's all these chapters, and the patterns. Some are charted and some are just written out, and it's kind of a different language. It's a terminology that I don't really use. You don't see a lot today, but there's of course a legend, so you can figure out what they're talking about. Actually, most of the patterns are not charted. There's all different things. And I actually have found some that are duplicated because they are, I suppose, from two different regions of the world. I found a couple that are duplicated. Anyway, what I'm going to do today is read through the introduction. And then in the next few episodes of my podcast, I will talk about what his perspective of knitting is in these different regions, and show some of the patterns and stuff. So his introduction is a little bit, it's interesting. The wording is interesting. This book was first published in 1962 by James Norbury, and then it was republished in 1973 by Dover Publications. It's also published, it was published in Canada and in the United Kingdom also. So it's a great book. I really like it. I refer to it a lot. There's some really fun patterns in here. if you want to find it at your local library or buy a copy. It's great. So here we go. So the title of the introduction is called In Search of Beauty. So it kind of is all over the place, but it's pretty fun. In Search of Beauty. Art is skill in making things that are useful. In this simple dictum, my friend, the late Eric Grill, sounded the death knell on the cranks and phonies who spell fine art in capital letters and common or garden craftsmanship in small ones. Some months later, he enlarged upon the theme by stating categorically that, quote, the artist is not a special kind of man, but every man is a special kind of artist. Isn't that awesome? Many people still think that the sanity of Gill's phrases led to the acceptance of parallels that cannot be justified in the realm of common sense. What he virtually does is equate the work of Michelangelo with the day-to-day job of the ordinary bricklayer. Surely, since Michelangelo himself was content to be called a workman, there is some justification in this suggestion. A brick properly laid is as significant as a painting or a carving or a piece of sculpture. The tragedy of our age is that we have divorced things from the places where they were meant to be, and shut them up in art galleries where, at times, the most beautiful objects tend to look like eccentric monstrosities because they have been divorced from their proper setting. Once we accept the full implication of Gill's definitions, we see that the splendor of the Taj Mahal, the elegance of a Chippendale chair or a Sheridan writing desk, the perfect shape of a Wedgwood teapot, or the fashion lines of a well-designed knitted sweater all form an intrinsic part of the creative pattern of being called into existence by man, the craftsman. They are a tribute to otherness, to that sense of timeless wonder that is man's true habitation. The principles of design are basic. They cannot be classified into any specific category. The great builders of the past, those architects whose genius created the temples of Greece, the palaces of Rome, the stately homes of Florence, all called on the craftsmen in gold and silver, in metal and stone, in silk and wool, to add to their basic creation those refinements that made it a thing of immortal splendor. What are these principles? They are the simple shapes of the circle, the square, the cross, and the waved line that are fundamental to all forms of design. Rooted as they are in man's thirst for divine things, they represent his finite being seeking to know and understand the meaning of infinity. The circle, the serpent swallowing its own tail, a line that has neither beginning nor end, is the oldest symbol of eternity. The square, the formal lines of a habitation that became the home, is an attempt to capture the sense of infinity in infinite terms. The square, the formal lines of the habitation that became the home, is an attempt to capture the sense of infinity in finite terms. The cross, with its 4 arms extending endlessly into space, is the mark of the adventurous spirit that is always seeking to move from the known to the unknown, from death to life, from mortal imprisonment and into that world of being which satisfied the immortal longings within him. The waved line, the ever-recurring upsurge of the water of life that nurses the seeds out of which the whole of creation has emerged. This concept of design is an integral part of the true philosophy of living and doing and being. It is rooted in the primitive mystery and magic that surrounded man in the dawn time of life on this planet. These symbols were used to decorate the robes of the witch doctors and the vestments of the ancient priest. They mark them as being a race apart, human beings dedicated to the service of the gods and seeking to bring about the reconciliation between the known and the unknown. Later, the same symbols were used to decorate the home, to remind man that this was his temporary habitation. Beyond the shadow of the walls of the cave he inhabited was a world surging with life and dominated by the haunting sense of the unknown. It's pretty deep for a knitting book, isn't it? But here we go. The first fabrics that man produced were simple cloths made from undyed fibers, out of which he created clothes for himself and hangings for his home. At a much later stage in the development of the craft of weaving, man painted simple patterns on these cloths and later still learned how to weave the patterns into the fabric itself. Knitted fabrics are an integral part of the development of textiles to be used in the service of man. I'm going to read that again. Knitted fabrics are an integral part of the development of textiles to be used in the service of man. It is not surprising, therefore, that we find in traditional knitting patterns a repetition of the principles of design that has already become part of the woven textile story. With the rise and fall of ancient culture, designs become more complex, colors more varied, and although the symbolic meaning of the patterns themselves have been lost in the myths of antiquity, the patterns still remain as part of our universal heritage. It is interesting that in the textiles of ancient Peru, the knitted tent flaps of the early nomads of North Africa, the magnificent knitted carpets of the Renaissance, the wonderful draperies and bedspreads made by the Dutch people in the 17th and 18th centuries, the exquisite knitted lace of France, Vienna, and Shetland, the gaily decorated peasant coats of the Austrian Tyrol, the highly sophisticated sweaters of Fair Isle, all embody within themselves a common tradition. Each little pocket of craftsmen gave their own particular twist to our story. The knitters of the Austrian Tyrol sprinkled their heavily embossed fabric with brightly colored embroidered flowers, reflecting the beauty of late spring in the Austrian valleys. The knitters of Fair Isle, inheriting their designs from the Spanish sources, still preserve Catholic tradition with that made Christendom. We can still find on the sweaters they knit the Sacred Heart, the Rose of Sharon, the Star of Hope, and the Crown of Glory. When we move to the ice-cold wastes of Norway, we find that the fir tree and the reindeer have been copied in their woven and knitted fabrics, and that even peasant costumes have been transformed into dancing figures that form border patternings on their gay sweaters. The fishermen and sailors, who were great knitters in their day, have taken the ropes and the anchors and have translated these into cable patterns and embossed designs, thus allying their day-to-day life as they go down to the sea in ships with the craft they practiced in knitting jerseys to protect them from the elements. In this book of traditional knitting patterns, I have collected together a selection of basic fabrics that I have found in all these parts of the world. I have visited where the knitter's craft is an essential part of life of common people. It is surprising how fabrics themselves reflect in some ways the temperament of their creators. The Mediterranean countries have given us gaily colored designs that have within them something of the laughter and sunshine that makes for the gaiety of the life of the common people. Germany and Austria present a more somber mood, a heavier, more prosaic approach in texturing and patterning. In Holland, we find a Puritan simplicity and almost stark and severe approach that reflects the sturdy and simple life of these good-hearted people. Some pretty broad generalizations going on here. In Scandinavia, white with all the radiance of the snow is fundamental, the patterns themselves being worked in dark greens, dark reds, dark browns, and dark blues, reflecting the violent contrast the snowscape presents in midwinter. That's a pretty interesting paragraph. His view of the world and people. It is through these simple truths, that he finds truths, that I have studied over 30 years now, and I have learned to know something of the history and habits of common people all the world over. And it is from the universality of design, the constant recurrence of the same symbol in a different setting, that I have acquired a sense of universal kinship with all men that has become basic to my own philosophy of living. Wow, this was written in 1962. It's so interesting, though. It just gives you a piece of culture and life. The last paragraph. We are all of us like the man in Plato's cave, seeing the shadows of ourselves on the walls of our prison house, and alas, all too often we mistake the shadow for the substance. The knitter's craft has taught me to have profound respect for the aesthetic heritage that is the birthright of all mankind. Now there's a sentence. The knitter's craft has taught me to have a profound respect for the aesthetic heritage that is the birthright of all mankind. It has led me to seek the good, the best tools, and the finest material out of which to create the ideas that have dominated my days, to seek the truth, the perfection in line and structure that is most perfect expression in terms of design I can find for those things I have made with my hands. To forget beauty, knowing that if a thing is good and true, then beauty can well be left to look after herself. James, What a guy. One of the things there's a quote attributed to him. He said of himself, "I was a foolhardy lover who has always been prepared to throw his loyalty and devotion at the feet of Mistress Knitting." He was a passionate knitter, passionate about what he did, obviously. So, take it for what you will. This book still is a great source. Happy solstice to everyone. Thank you for sticking with me. And it's good to see you. I probably won't podcast again until after the new year. Stay warm. Happy knitting. If you like this podcast, give me a thumbs up. And come over to the Ravelry group and introduce yourselves. I have a Ravelry group called Knit 56 where you can find the pattern notes. And yeah, thanks for joining me. And stay warm and happy knitting.